Hi, I'm Claire Braun,
And I'm Rich Collins.
and we're both writing instructors at Oregon State University's School of Writing, Literature, and Film. And in this video, we're going to talk about writing in the workplace and what defines this type of writing. So how would you define workplace writing?
So I think of business writing as any kind of written communication that happens in a workplace.
And sometimes we use the terms business writing and workplace writing interchangeably.
Right.
We're mostly using the term workplace writing in this course because we're talking about writing that's not just for businesses, but also for things like nonprofits or other kinds of institutions besides for-profit businesses. But a lot of the time, this kind of writing is referred to as business writing.
Yes, but really it's just any kind of written communication that happens in a workplace.
Right.
So it can be emails, or it can
Yeah.
be memos, or proposals, or reports.
It can even be things like text messages, of course, depending on your work environment, but I have definitely texted with coworkers and even supervisors in several
Right.
different workplaces. And business writing could also be things like newsletters, right, or flyers.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about writing that happens before you've entered the workplace, it could even be things like resumes and cover letters as well, which are the important part of business writing or business communication,
Yeah.
especially for getting you the job, since these are really the first forms of communication that you have with a potential employer.
Right, yeah. And do you think I'm wrong in saying that probably emails are the most ubiquitous form of workplace writing?
No, I think that's absolutely true. It's been my experience in all of the industries that I've worked in, whether it be in nonprofit or the healthcare industry, or even a lot of the work that I do in education,
Right.
that email takes up a substantial amount of the time.
Yeah.
It's probably the single most important contemporary form of business communication.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that when you do it well, people notice, and it really shines well on you to take email seriously.
Right.
Because when it's done incorrectly or unprofessionally, it can really reflect poorly on you and make you look bad. And so I think that it's one of those kinds of writing that everyone has to do it, but not a lot of people do it well.
Yeah, and I think much of the time it's a genre that we think of as like a quick thing, like you just shoot off an email. But in my experience, emails have to get drafted. I'll write a first draft and then I'll have to go through and revise it, make any corrections, make sure I don't have any typos, and make sure that I have communicated my meaning as clearly as is possible.
Right. And also, one of the things that we talk about in business writing is how to write for your audience.
Right.
And the audience is something that changes all of the time.
Right.
So if I'm emailing my supervisor about a problem, then I might spend a very long time on that email, making sure that I'm handling a tricky situation with the utmost care.
Right.
But if I'm just emailing a coworker about a project to check in on her progress, then it might take me less than a minute to compose that email.
Right, especially depending on the relationship you have with that particular coworker.
Right.
If like you have the kind of relationship where you joke around a lot, then it might be perfectly appropriate to actually put in an emoji or a smiley face or something. Whereas most of the time, you probably don't want to do that in workplace writing.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you never do. It's all about the particular situation.
Right.
Which brings us to another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the kind of language that we tend to think of as professional or appropriate for workplace writing. So obviously we should use language that's respectful, right? And that won't in some way offend our audience.
Right. And a lot of that is about putting yourself mentally in your audience's
Right.
place and really empathizing with them so that you can anticipate how they are going to react.
Right. And being clear and concise is also a really big part of the language style that we consider to be professional writing. And of course, then there's grammar, right? So it's pretty important to have the kind of grammar that's going to impress your audience or at the very least not distract them. And much of the time we have this idea that good writing is just writing that's grammatically correct. But of course, there's a lot more to good writing than simply following grammar rules. However, that being said, you do want to make sure that you have a solid understanding of the standard forms of grammar that are generally expected or accepted in the professional world,
Right.
which tend to correspond with the standard academic English that we use in school or academic environments, which is why we are starting our course talking about workplace writing fundamentals and sort of building the basic building blocks of grammar so that that can be kind of a foundation from which we build. It's certainly not where the study of any kind of writing, whether it's writing in the workplace or anything else, should end. But grammar is where we're going to start.
Right. The other thing that's important about grammar is that it applies to all of the genres of
Right.
workplace writing.
Yeah.
Because it's as important for your memos to be grammatically correct as it is for your emails. And especially if you have consistently poor grammar in email communication, then that's going to reflect poorly on you as well.
Right. Yeah. So there's this speech by Stephen Fry, the British comedian and actor, and I quite like his speech where he's sort of going on a rant against people who are overly strict about grammar rules. And he says that, mostly we understand what another person is saying, even when they're not using immaculate, perfect grammar. But one point he makes is that you have to match your grammar and your language to the occasion, in the same way you match your clothing to the occasion. So just as you dress up your clothing for a job interview, you should also dress up your language with the kind of more formal styles of grammar and punctuation. But for a lot of us, we didn't learn those formal styles consistently in school.
Right. And it's not something that comes naturally.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to let those things slip.
Yeah, especially because the grammar that governs our spoken communication is often very different from what is considered correct and formal written grammar.
Right.
You could have an incomplete sentence or a run-on sentence while you're speaking, and we wouldn't even notice. It doesn't sound like an error, but it would appear to be an error in writing.
Exactly, which is why those fundamentals of writing and grammar are a great place to start.
Right. And that's where we're going to start. And by the end of this class, you should have built up a good toolkit of writing strategies and knowledge that you can use to write successfully in a wide variety of workplace genres and situations.